Are you sure you're in the right room? In the right room? He repeated. Yes, I'm here for the board review meeting. The woman smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile meant to cover discomfort or arrogance. Oh, of course, she said, gesturing vaguely toward his clothes. We just assumed you were maintenance staff. They laughed at him because they don't think he's up to anything good. Please don't forget to support this channel with your subscription, like, and comment. The sun sat high above the neighborhood like a silent witness, scattering its heat across cracked sidewalks and aging rooftops. Kids darted between houses, their laughter echoing through community, as if they could outrun the heaviness life had taught them too soon. On the far end of the street stood the old community center. Its fading brick walls held far more stories than its quiet exterior revealed. Inside, however, was a different world, a world where the air felt stiff, a world where smiles felt tight, a world where certain people walked in confident and others walked in carefully. Marcus Johnson stepped through the glass doors of the community center with a deep breath. He had been here before many times, sometimes volunteering, sometimes attending youth events, but today felt different. Today, his palms were damp with anxiety. Today, he carried a folder filled with the youth development program he had poured his heart into for nearly a year. He had always been the kind of man who believed in building rather than complaining. When he saw problems, he sought solutions. When he saw children drifting into the streets, he built mentorship models. When he saw hopelessness gripping young people like chains, he spent hours designing paths to help them break free. This folder wasn't just ideas. It was answers he wished someone had given him at 12 or 15 or even 19 when he was trying to figure out who he could be in a world that had already made assumptions. But today, he wasn't sure if the people he needed to work with would ever see him beyond their assumptions. Marcus smoothed the front of his shirt, inhaled again, and walked toward the meeting room. He had emailed the board members, introduced himself politely, and asked to present his proposal for a youth safety initiative, one that he believed could transform the community's future. But as he approached, he heard voices inside. Sharp, dismissive, unwelcoming. The door was slightly ajar, and the sound carried clearly. "Did you see his email?" a woman's voice murmured, her tone laced with something that felt too familiar to Marcus. The grammar was fine, but the way he phrased things, he sounded inexperienced. A man's chuckle followed. Probably someone looking for a handout or a quick job. These programs attract that type. Another voice, older, rougher. "Let's see what he wants. But I'm telling you now, we already have names for the role. We need professionalism." Professionalism. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. He had a master's degree in youth psychology. He had worked on state-level initiatives. He had experience these people didn't even know existed. But he stayed quiet. He wasn't here to fight them. He was here for the kids. He knocked lightly. The conversation inside cut off like a power outage. "Come in," the woman called, her voice now coated in politeness that sounded as thin as paper. Marcus pushed the door open. The room was bright, but the welcome was dim. 3 white board members sat at a long wooden table. The woman from earlier, a younger man with a stiff suit, and an older man leaning back as though already bored with the moment. Their eyes skimmed over Marcus, not on him, but through him. It was a feeling he had known too many times. "Good afternoon," Marcus said evenly. "I'm Marcus Johnson, the one who emailed about the youth development program." A brief pause. Then the younger man asked, "Are you sure you're in the right room?" Marcus blinked slowly. "In the right room?" he repeated. "Yes, I'm here for the board review meeting." The woman smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile meant to cover discomfort or arrogance. "Oh, of course," she said, gesturing vaguely toward his clothes. "We just assumed you were maintenance staff." Marcus let the words sink in. They cut deep, not because of what was said, but because of what was implied. He responded with a calm, steady voice. "No, I'm here for the program presentation." The older man waved a hand. "Well, go ahead then. But we're short on time, so make it quick." Marcus took a slow breath. Everything about their behavior felt rehearsed, like they'd already decided his worth before he stepped inside. But he forced himself to focus. He took a seat, opened his folder, and began laying out the documents. The woman didn't even look at them. Her attention drifted to her phone. The younger man examined his nails. The older man sighed loudly every few seconds. Still, Marcus continued. He presented his plan with passion, explaining how teens needed safe evening spaces, mentorship programs, and emotional support systems. He described the real threats he'd seen: gang pressure, academic frustration, domestic struggles, peer influence, mental health battles. He illustrated the real, raw reasons kids were slipping through the cracks. But despite the depth of his words, the board members' faces remained blank. And then the dismissal began. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," the woman said, flipping through his pages carelessly. "But we've already been talking to someone with more formal credentials." Marcus stared at her. More formal? He had not only credentials, but lived experience. He had the deepest understanding anyone could hope for in this work. The younger man chimed in, "Your plan is good, but it's just ambitious. Maybe too ambitious for someone without the right background." The older man nodded. "We need professionals, son. People who know how to handle budgets, stakeholders, big responsibilities. Son." Marcus almost winced. A word older white men often use when trying to remind him of where they believe he belonged. Still, he held his ground. "With respect," he said, "I do have the background. And I—" The woman cut him off with a smile too wide to be genuine. "That's admirable. Truly. But we got someone lined up, and we think it's best if we stick with that." The finality of her tone hit, like a slammed door. Marcus looked at the three faces before him. He felt the weight of their assumptions press heavily against his chest. They didn't hear him. They didn't see him. They didn't want to. They had judged him before he said his first sentence. He gathered his papers slowly. Each page felt heavier than the last. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of being handed disrespect wrapped in professionalism. Tired of arrogance hiding behind polite smiles. Tired of people who believed skin determined capability. He closed the folder. Then, in a quiet voice filled with strength they had not expected, he said, "I understand." He reached into the folder and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "This is the only document you need." The woman frowned. "What is—" Her question died on her lips. The younger man leaned forward, eyes widening. The older man straightened up slowly. The letterhead, the seal, the signature. State of Willowbrook, Office of Youth Development. Marcus Johnson, newly appointed Regional Youth Development Director. Silence swallowed the room whole. It was a kind of silence that didn't merely quiet voices. It crushed assumptions. It choked arrogance. It mirrored the shock of people who had built entire beliefs on stereotypes, only to watch them crumble in real time. The woman blinked rapidly. The younger man's face went pale. The older man's mouth fell open slightly. Marcus stood up, not with pride, but with dignity. "I wasn't required to be here," he said softly, "but I wanted to understand the environment this community's youth are dealing with. Now I know." A heavy beat passed. The younger man swallowed hard. "We," his voice cracked. "We didn't know." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "You didn't ask." The weight of those 3 words settled like stone. And with that, Marcus turned toward the door, leaving behind a room filled with stunned silence and wounded pride. The air outside the community center greeted Marcus with gentle warmth, wrapping around like a quiet reassurance. But inside his chest, a storm churned. He walked slowly across the sunlit pavement, his thoughts tangled in both frustration and resolve. The building behind him stood still, unaware of the truth that had just penetrated its walls, or maybe unwilling to confront it. He paused near the sidewalk, inhaling deeply. The scent of fried plantain drifting from a nearby home reminded him of childhood, of the simpler days before expectations and injustice became constant companions. For a moment, he let the memory ground him. But memories also carried weight, and today, that weight felt especially heavy. His phone buzzed inside his pocket, vibrating with reminders, notifications, and messages, but he ignored them. Instead, he made his way toward the small park across the street. A cluster of kids played basketball at the far end, the rhythmic thud of the ball filling the space with life. Watching them brought a soft ache to his heart. These kids were the reason he worked, the reason he fought, the reason he refused to let anyone undermine what he had spent years building. Not even a room full of people dripping with prejudice disguised as professionalism. Marcus sat on a bench, the wooden slats warm beneath him. He loosened the tight grip. He realized he still had on his folder. The community deserved better leadership than the type he had just encountered. They deserved leaders who saw children as potential, not as problems. Leaders who listened, leaders who cared. He leaned back and watched the clouds creep slowly across the sky. But beneath his calm exterior, one truth pulsed. He hadn't just been appointed Regional Youth Development Director out of luck or convenience. There was more to the story. Something deeper. Something the board members didn't know, and weren't ready to know. Something he was now being forced to revisit. His phone buzzed again. This time, he sighed and pulled it out. A text flashed across the screen from his supervisor, Mrs. Carter. Meeting confirmed at 4. Bring the community report. We need to finalize your introduction. Marcus stared at the message, exhaling slowly. His introduction. The formal announcement to the entire region. Another wave of anxiety rolled over him. Not because he doubted himself, but because stepping into this role meant stepping back into spaces that weren't always kind to him. Spaces that had once broken him before building him again. He tucked his phone into his pocket and stood up on the bench, deciding to walk instead of taking a ride. The slow pace helped him think, helped him reflect, helped him gather strength for what lay ahead. The streets of the neighborhood hummed with life. Vendors shouting friendly greetings, children chasing each other between doorsteps, elders sitting on chairs outside their homes sharing stories. It was a community dripping with resilience, even in its shortcomings. A community worth fighting for. As Marcus walked, he couldn't help but recall the board members' expressions, confusion, embarrassment, discomfort. But guilt was not his mission. Change was. He turned a corner and headed toward the busier part of town. Cars passed in steady waves, honking occasionally. Street shops lined the sidewalks, filled with vibrant fabrics, snacks, and handmade goods. Marcus had grown up on these streets. Every crack in the pavement, every familiar face, every old corner store that struggled to stay afloat held a piece of his childhood. And though he had once felt boxed in by expectations and stereotypes, today he returned not as the boy who used to walk these streets, but as the man who would help reshape them. As he approached a traffic intersection, he saw a familiar figure, a middle-aged woman selling fruit under a faded umbrella. Her name was Mrs. Abik. She had known Marcus since he was 10, often slipping him extra oranges when he didn't have enough money. "Marcus," she called out when she spotted him. Her smile stretched wide across her face. "Ah, my son, look at you now. You carry yourself like someone going to meet big people." Marcus chuckled softly and approached her stall. "Good afternoon, Ma. How are the sales today?" She sighed dramatically, waving a hand as if shooing away her own complaint. "Sales are slow, but life continues. What of you? I heard some people in the community center were talking about you being promoted to some big youth director. Is it true?" Marcus blinked, surprised that news had traveled so fast. But then again, in neighborhoods like this, gossip moved faster than wind. "Yes, Ma," he said with a humble nod. "The appointment came last week." "Hen." Her eyebrows shot up in delight. "I knew it. Since you were small, you always had sense. You cared for those boys that used to fight on this street. You helped them read, do homework. I'm not surprised at all." Her pride warmed him. Real pride, not the fake politeness he had endured earlier. "Thank you, Ma. I appreciate. But tell me something," she continued, narrowing her eyes with curiosity. "Why did they choose you so suddenly? People said the previous director left without notice." Marcus exhaled, his gaze drifting toward the sidewalk. "That is a long story." "Then tell me one day," she insisted, her voice softening. "I will," he promised. "But right now, I need to get to a meeting." She handed him a small bag of oranges. "Take, for strength." Marcus smiled gratefully and continued on his way. His footsteps echoed a steady rhythm down the pavement, but his mind had already drifted back toward the truth he had been avoiding, the truth that tied him to this job. the truth that connected his past to his purpose. He tightened his grip on the oranges as a memory began to surface, sharp, detailed, painful. The sudden appointment had not been planned. It had not been strategic. It had not been a peaceful transition. The previous director, Mr. Hollings, had been exposed. For months, whispers had circulated about funds disappearing, paperwork not adding up, and programs failing despite large amounts of money being allocated. Parents complained that promised mentorships never began. Kids said they showed up to empty classrooms. Volunteers quit out of frustration. Still, everything remained hidden until someone stepped in, until someone spoke up, until someone presented evidence. That someone was Marcus. He had discovered the truth accidentally while working on a smaller initiative. Documents didn't match. Schedules were edited. Records were manipulated. And when he confronted Mr. Hollings directly, the man dismissed him with a sneer, just like today's board members had. But Marcus didn't back down. He collected statements, gathered proof, handed everything to the state board. And in less than 3 weeks, Mr. Hollings was removed, investigated, and permanently barred from youth programs. When the dust settled, the state needed someone trustworthy, someone who knew the community, someone who had integrity, someone the young people respected. They chose Marcus. But that wasn't the full suspense. The real mystery, the one still unspoken, was tied to why Marcus had been the only person who recognized the signs of corruption, why he had taken the risk, why he had acted when others had turned a blind eye. It wasn't just because he cared about the kids. It was deeper, older, much more personal. It traced back to something that happened in his youth, something he had never told the board, never shared publicly, and never fully healed from. As he neared the regional office building where his meeting would take place, his chest tightened. He stopped for a moment, staring up at the glass windows, reflecting the sky. He knew that stepping inside meant stepping fully into his new role, and also stepping closer to the past he had spent years burying. Because the same corruption he uncovered in the youth programs had once swallowed someone he loved. And that hidden truth, the truth of who Marcus really was, and why he fought so fiercely for these children, was about to resurface. The suspense lingered like a shadow behind him, creeping closer. Marcus straightened his shoulders, took a breath, and walked toward the entrance. He was strong enough now. The regional office towered above Marcus, a sleek and modern contrast to the worn streets he had walked earlier. Its tall windows gleamed beneath the afternoon sun, and its polished metal frames reflected a world that often pretended to be perfect, even when the truth hiding behind its glass halls was anything but. Marcus paused outside the revolving doors, feeling familiar knot tightening inside his stomach. He wasn't nervous about the meeting. He knew his plan. He knew his purpose. He knew the children he wanted to lift. What unsettled him was the truth shadowing his every step. The truth he had buried so deeply that even he avoided touching it. But now, with every passing hour, it was drawing closer, rising like an old ghost refusing to stay forgotten. He pushed through the doors. Inside, the building's lobby buzzed with movement. Employees in fitted suits hurried between elevators. Receptionists answered phones with voices too cheerful to be real. Visitors filled the waiting area, flipping through leaflets and checking digital screens. Marcus walked toward the front desk. "Good afternoon," he said politely. The receptionist glanced up, then quickly stood. "Mr. Johnson, welcome. Mrs. Carter is waiting for you in conference room 3. The respect in her voice wasn't forced. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't dipped in doubt. It made him feel both grateful and guilty. Grateful that his work had earned recognition. Guilty because the world had a strange way of honoring him publicly while still challenging him privately. "Thank you," he told her, giving a small smile as he headed for the elevators. The mirrored walls inside the lift reflected him from every angle. His neatly pressed shirt, his tired but determined eyes, the quiet weight he carried in his shoulders. With each floor the elevator climbed, so did the memories he tried to keep chained. He had fought corruption in the youth programs not because he was brave, or because he wanted recognition, or because he felt obligated. He did it because he had seen what corruption could do. He had lived through it. He had suffered from it. He had lost someone to it. The elevator chimed and stopped on the 7th floor. Marcus stepped out, greeted by a hallway lined with posters promoting youth empowerment programs he was now responsible for repairing and expanding. He walked toward conference room 3. The door was open. Inside, his supervisor, Mrs. Claire Carter, stood reviewing some documents. She was a woman in her late 50s, sharp-eyed but warm-hearted, with a presence that could silence a room without raising her voice. She looked up immediately. "Marcus," she said with a smile, "I'm glad you're here. Come in." He stepped inside. "Before we begin," she said, folding her glasses, "I need to ask, how did your visit to Community Center go?" Marcus let out a small breath. "I saw what I needed to see." "Which is?" "The leadership there isn't the problem," he said, lowering himself into a chair. "Their mindsets are." Mrs. Carter sighed, knowingly. "I suspected as much. They've been resistant for months. I'm sorry you had to experience that, especially today." Marcus shook his head. It wasn't new, just disappointing. Mrs. Carter studied him carefully, noticing the heaviness behind his words. Then she set her papers aside. "Marcus," she began gently, "I've worked with you long enough to know when something else is troubling you. Ever since they confirmed your appointment, you've been carrying something inside you, something you haven't shared." Marcus swallowed hard. He had hoped to delay this moment, but he should have known better. Mrs. Carter was perceptive. She had championed him long before the promotion. She had fought for him in rooms where his name wasn't welcomed, and she had always sensed when he was battling shadows no one else could see. He stared at the polished table surface, watching the fluorescent lights reflect in soft patterns. "There's something I haven't told anyone," he finally said. His voice was quiet, steady, but trembling slightly on the edges. "Something I've kept private since I was a teenager." Mrs. Carter leaned forward. "Take your time." Marcus inhaled deeply. "My mother," he began, "used to work for a youth rehabilitation program. She believed in helping kids who made mistakes. She was kind, patient. She saw the good in people, even when others couldn't." His words softened at the memory of her, as if speaking about her reignited a fading warmth. "But the program she worked for," he continued, "was corrupt. The director, Mr. Hollings's mentor, was stealing funds. Programs were under-resourced. Kids weren't being helped. Some were being pushed toward worse environments because the system failed them." Mrs. Carter's face tightened with concern. "One day," Marcus said, "my mother uncovered evidence. She didn't stay silent, and she paid for it." His breath shook subtly. Mrs. Carter's voice softened. "What happened to her, Marcus?" He lowered his eyes. "She was fired, publicly shamed, accused of lying. She lost her job, her income, her reputation. People she had helped turned against her because they were manipulated into believing she was the problem." A painful silence filled the room. "And the worst part," Marcus whispered, "she never recovered. The stress, the embarrassment, the financial struggle, it broke her. She passed away when I was 17. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth, eyes glistening. "Oh, Marcus, I had no idea." "No one does," he said. "I promised myself I'd never let another child suffer, because adults in power chose greed over compassion. When I saw what Hollings was doing, I couldn't walk away. I couldn't be silent the way others were. I couldn't let history repeat itself." He paused, exhaling shakily. "And when they decided to replace Hollings," he continued, "I didn't expect to be chosen, but when they offered me the position, I realized something." Mrs. Carter nodded gently. "What was that?" "That this wasn't an opportunity," he said slowly. "It was a responsibility." His voice deepened with conviction. "A responsibility to honor my mother's legacy, to protect these kids the way no one protected me when my world fell apart, to make sure another corrupt leader never buries the truth again." Mrs. Carter reached across the table and laid a hand on his. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," she said softly. Marcus gave a small nod, his eyes burning slightly. "Thank you." Then she leaned back and smiled faintly. "And that, Marcus, is exactly why you're the right person for this role." A sense of relief washed over him. Relief from finally speaking the truth out loud. But another wave quickly followed. Determination. Now, Mrs. Carter continued, there's something I must tell you. Marcus frowned slightly. There are whispers, she said, lowering her voice. Whispers at Hollings that supporters, people who might not be happy you expose them. People who might try to discredit you the way your mother was discredited. Marcus stiffened. But don't worry, she added firmly. We're prepared. You're not alone in this. He nodded slowly, but he felt a chill of familiar fear creeping down his spine. The kind of fear that came from watching someone he loved be crushed by a system designed to protect itself. The past was resurfacing. The present was shifting. And the future now hung on a delicate balance. Mrs. Carter stood. Come, she said. Let's rehearse your introduction speech. You'll be addressing the entire regional board in 2 days. We need your words sharp, your heart steady, and your truth ready. Marcus rose to his feet. But deep within him, the suspense he carried tightened even more, because as he prepared to step into the spotlight, somewhere out there, the same forces that destroyed his mother's life were waking up again. And they were about to learn that this time, Marcus Johnson was not a scared boy. He was a man armed with truth, resilience, and a fire no one could extinguish. The quiet of the evening pressed softly against the windows of Marcus's home as he sat alone at his dining table, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside him. Part of him was still replaying the moment he walked out of the boardroom earlier that afternoon. The stares, the shock, the shame on their faces when they realized who he really was. Another part of him felt the heavy responsibility that came with his new position. But beneath all of that lay a deeper emotion that Marcus didn't often allow himself to feel. Exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but the deep, soul-worn tiredness that comes from constantly proving your humanity in spaces that question it before you even speak. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the silence hold him. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message from Maya. Asterisk, you okay? Asterisk. He breathed slowly before typing. Asterisk, yeah, just thinking. Asterisk. Her reply came instantly. Asterisk, I'm coming over. Don't argue. Asterisk. Marcus smiled softly despite himself. Maya had always been like that, bold, direct, and fiercely protective. In a world that often looked at black people as problems to be solved or threats to be neutralized, Maya looked at Marcus as someone worth defending, supporting, and pushing forward. 20 minutes later, a soft knock sounded at his door. When he opened it, Maya walked in without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes were sharp, her expression halfway between worry and irritation. I watched the live stream, she said, placing a bag on the table. You handled it better than I would have. Marcus chuckled. That's not saying much. You would have flipped the whole table. Maybe, she smirked. Then her face softened. Sit. I brought food. You need to eat. Marcus didn't argue. She unpacked the containers, jollof rice, grilled chicken, fried plantain. Food that felt like home, like grounding, like strength. As they sat together, Maya watched him carefully. They embarrass themselves, you know, she said. Not you. He stared at his plate. I know, but it still hits. Of course it does, she replied softly. Being disrespected still hurts, even when the person disrespecting you ends up looking foolish in the end. Marcus's fingers tightened slightly around his fork. I'm tired, Maya. Tired of walking into rooms and being doubted. Tired of having to explain why I'm qualified. Tired of being treated like a problem. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. I know. I see it. And so do many other people who believe in you. He didn't answer immediately. The truth was, despite the humiliation he endured, despite the disrespect, despite the fact that it turned the moment around, something still knotted in his chest, a feeling that justice shouldn't have to be earned through suffering. It should exist because people deserve it. As he ate slowly, Maya changed the subject. I heard you're going back to that community center tomorrow. Marcus nodded. I have to. The youth program starts next week. If I don't go, the kids lose. And I won't let them suffer because of some ignorant board members. That's why they need you, Maya said. You walk back in there, not for them, but for the kids who will grow into adults who don't have to face what you face today. He exhaled deeply. I hope so. The next morning, Marcus dressed in a simple navy shirt and slacks. Nothing overly formal, nothing meant to prove anything to anyone. He wanted to walk into that building as himself, not as someone performing to satisfy the expectations of others. When he arrived, he paused at the entrance of the community center, the same doorway where he'd stood yesterday as those board members dismissed him. He inhaled slowly, silently reminding himself, asterisk, this place belongs to the community, not to prejudice. Asterisk. He stepped inside. The hallway buzzed with murmurs and footsteps. Word had already spread. Asterisk, asterisk, the director was returning. Asterisk, asterisk. As Marcus turned the corner toward the boardroom, he saw someone waiting outside the door. Mr. Dalton, the older white man who had spoken to him with the most arrogance yesterday. Marcus stopped. Dalton straightened his suit jacket and cleared his throat. Good morning, Director Johnson. His voice trembled slightly, but he forced himself to meet Marcus's eyes. Marcus remained silent. Dalton swallowed hard. I came early today. I wanted to speak before the meeting. Marcus folded his arms gently, keeping his tone controlled. I'm listening. Dalton looked down. I want to apologize. Not because you hold the title you do, though that was quite the shock yesterday. He gave a small, awkward smile before dropping it. But because I behave like someone I don't want to be. I judged you before I knew you, and I'm ashamed. Marcus studied him carefully. He had seen many apologies before, some sincere, some meant only to protect reputations. But this one held trembling honesty. I appreciate the apology, Marcus said slowly, but I didn't come here for personal validation. This place needs rebuilding, not just a program, but the mindset. Dalton nodded. You're right, and if you'll allow me, I want to be part of that rebuilding, even if it means listening more than talking. Marcus nodded once. Then let's start there. They walked into the boardroom together. The other members looked up with stiff, nervous expressions, as though unsure how to greet the man they had so carelessly underestimated. Marcus took his place at the head of the table, a seat none of them had even imagined him occupying. He opened his folder. Before we begin, he said calmly, I want to set one expectation moving forward. Every child in this community deserves dignity, respect, and opportunity. If anyone in this room has an issue supporting that, this seat is not for you. Silence. Not defensive silence. Not offended silence, but humbled silence. The older woman who had dismissed him earlier spoke first. We understand. Thank you for giving us a chance to do better. Marcus nodded. Let's begin. For the next 2 hours, he outlined the youth program details, the tutoring sessions, the mentorship plans, the weekend safety workshops, and the creative hubs for kids who wanted to learn art, music, or technology. Slowly, the board members shifted from defensive to engaged. They asked questions respectfully. They listened. They took notes. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be perfect overnight, but it was a start. After the meeting ended, Marcus headed toward the exit. Several parents were walking in, greeting him warmly. Some recognizing him from earlier community events, others simply offering friendly smiles. As he reached the doorway, a young black boy, about 12, ran up to him. Sir, are you the director now? Marcus knelt slightly to be eye level. I am. The boy grinned. My mom said you're going to help us get a music studio. I want to learn keyboard. Marcus's heart warmed. Then we'll make sure that happens. The boy nodded enthusiastically and ran back to his mother. As Marcus stepped outside, Maya's voice called from across the parking lot. So, how'd it go? He walked to her with a small but genuine smile. Better than expected. She studied him. How do you feel? He looked out at the neighborhood. The kids walking home from school, the families gathering at porches, the cars passing slowly down the road. I feel hopeful, he said softly. Not because everyone changed, but because today proved something important. Something I want future generations to know without needing to experience the pain first. Maya waited. Marcus turned to her, his voice steady, resonant, and full of the weight of truth. That no matter how the world tries to frame you, underestimate you, or silence you, your worth isn't decided by their ignorance. Justice doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from standing firm in who you are and refusing to shrink. Maya smiled gently. Say it louder. He exhaled, letting the message settle in his chest. Dignity is not granted by any system, he said. It is something you carry. And when you walk in it, even those who try to diminish you end up seeing the truth. She nodded proudly. That's the story people need to hear. Marcus looked back at the community center, no longer a place where he had been dismissed, but a place where a shift had begun. Not because he demanded power, not because he sought revenge, but because he chose justice, clarity, and unwavering self-respect. He walked forward into the sunlight, his shadow stretching long behind him. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest, purposeful, and grounded in belief that every person, every child, every adult, every community member deserved to be seen, heard, and valued. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something powerful rising within him. Not anger, not exhaustion, not bitterness, but determination. A determination to keep showing the world, one community, one program, one conversation at a time, that dignity is not optional. It is a right, a necessity, and a foundation for real justice. He whispered to himself as he walked, a quiet promise for the future. Never again will anyone define my worth. Never again will I let prejudice shape my path. And never again will I allow silence where truth is needed, because the fight wasn't over, but it was moving forward. And today, Marcus Johnson stood not as a victim or an outsider, but as a leader, firm, resilient, and unshakably proud of who he was. If the story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that dignity, justice, and equality are not optional but necessary, then don't just click away. Like this video to help more people hear stories that matter. Comment your thoughts below. Your voice can inspire someone else. Share this video with a friend, a family member, or anyone who needs a reminder that every person deserves respect. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next powerful story we're bringing your way. Your engagement isn't just support. It's part of a movement for awareness, unity, and change. Let's continue speaking truth together. Let's continue standing for justice. Let's continue honoring the dignity of every Black life. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.